Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Optimal Wealth Podcast, where we discuss creating passive income through real estate. Our mission is to help educate investors on how to grow wealth and invest passively. My name is Jared Alexander, and I am a passive investor, currently in 6 syndications as a limited partner. I am also the founder of Optimal Equity Group, which is a real estate investment firm that was created primarily to help educate the passive investor. We do that in a couple of different ways. One is we provide education to help give you the confidence to get into the passive investing space. And two, each episode we will interview amazing guests that explore the strategies, insights, and secrets used by successful investors. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out on your real estate journey, this podcast is designed to help give you the confidence and knowledge you need to make informed and profitable decisions. Welcome to another episode of the Optimal Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Alexander, and today I'm super excited to dive in deep into the space of multifamily and passive investing with our guest, Charlie Hardage. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Jared, man, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Absolutely. Well, it's feel like we just talked just recently, Charlie, huh?
Yeah, it's been maybe 24 hours or so.
Maybe, yeah, that, huh?
Yeah.
I actually Charlie has a podcast as well, and I was a guest on his show yesterday, so definitely enjoyed our conversation and thought he'd bring a ton of value to our listeners here, and he graciously agreed, and now here we are. So yeah. All right, so Charlie is a little background on Charlie here. He worked in the corporate world for over 12 years in IT sales. He worked with household names like Google, Dell, AWS. Charlie spent 5 years in the U.S. Army as an infantry team leader, earning a combat infantryman badge and Purple Heart. Wow, Charlie, I just wanted to stop there a minute and highlight, and just tell you thank you for your service.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah. And, he has been investing in real estate since 2017 as a co-founder of H&K Investment Group. He's a part owner in over 1,050 doors across 6 properties. And in 2022, he left his full-time job to pursue real estate full-time. His company works with passive investors and helps them achieve financial freedom through cash flowing properties. So Charlie, let's dive in, and if you could, tell listeners a little bit more about your background and how you got involved in real estate and why real estate, right?
Man, so much here. I'll try to
lot to unpack for sure.
Yeah. Try to make sure no one falls asleep, and that's okay if you do. So I grew up in Dallas. I live in Nashville now. Grew up in Dallas. I grew up like most people had that. I was taught do well in school so I can get into a good college. Do well at college so I get a good degree, get a good job, climb the corporate ladder as fast as I can, pinch pennies, max out 401k, IRA. And if I have anything left over, then go ahead and put that into mutual funds. Yeah. So that's really what I did. I went to college. I will not say that I had good grades. I almost had to retake some classes in high school and had some fun in college. So my grades weren't really there. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And when I was had been working for Dell selling computers for a couple of years, it's like I'm obviously not getting any younger. So I actually joined the Army. I was 25 when I went into the Army. And that was going to be my career. That's what I wanted to do. I had my mind set on that. When in 2012, I read a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that completely changed my outlook, my mindset. I knew real estate was such a great avenue to build wealth. Didn't really know how to do that, where to do that, who to do that with. And in 2012, I was injured in the military. And so I'm medically retired. And so my lifelong dream of going and serving my country for 20 plus years went out the window just like that. So fortunately, I just read Rich Dad Poor Dad about 2 or 3 months earlier. Had my wife send me tons of books over. I was in Afghanistan, and when I got back home, I still had that fire of just keep learning and educating myself. And that I had this fire burning, and I'll stop there because I could keep going on me not taking action for years. But that's how I got interested in real estate is really having so much free time in Afghanistan that I read about 10 real estate books.
So I'm curious, did you have like a buddy or a friend like talking about real estate and what they were doing, or did you just kind of decided you want to start educating yourself on what else is out there and fell upon real estate?
My so growing up, my parents had a couple homes.
Right.
They had the primary residence, and they were house hacking before that was the term. And then they also had one small rental. In the late 80s, they sold all that, never had rentals again. And so I remember them telling me, yeah, it's a great investment. But they weren't doing it, right? And they were telling me, yeah, it's a great investment, but go do 401ks, IRAs, and,
Right.
and mutual funds. Um, in college, I had a really good buddy and now business partner who his family had some real estate. His uncle, who lived in a different country, had real estate, and I was like, man, that's awesome. Let's do that. And so it was always kind of there, but not no mentors, never educated myself. That was before Bigger Pockets, before I knew much about real estate. Rich Dad Poor Dad was out, but I didn't read at that point, right? Like I didn't want to read. It was a waste of time. And so it was just like, yeah, I had this awesome dream to own real estate, but I'm not going to do one single thing to get there except hope and pray and wish,
Right.
So there was a little bit there, but really, I think when I was 10, 11, 12, one of my really good friends, his dad actually owned a business, which was so foreign to me. And so he was home, a lot, took us out to games and sporting events and uh, putt, golf, arcades, movies, all that stuff. I'm like, how is he doing this? So it wasn't really the real estate piece that was intriguing to me. It was me being able to control my time. I didn't know it at that point in my life because I was young, but it was really that time I was time freedom driven is really what pushed me. And then real estate just kind of was there. And it wasn't until Rich Dad Poor Dad where I was like, what am I doing with my life?
Right. Well, and so let's talk about we fast forward through let's call it the analysis paralysis stage or not taking action, right? And but so finally you came up to this point and I think, and I know yesterday we talked a lot about mindset too. I mean, a lot of this has to do with mindset. And if you could, tell listeners how you came, or, how you overcame that middle class mindset.
Yeah, it's definitely an evolution. I feel like, you know, it, these baby steps I was taking, unfortunately, they were baby steps and they took a long time. But I do feel like if I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, when I was in college or right after college, I would have been like, yeah, that's great, but no. Um, Really, man, I think the biggest thing, I actually went to grad school. I was applying for school. The last thing I had to do was a video recording, and it was 1 minute. I had no idea what the topic would be, and so I had to understand that topic and then talk for 1 minute and prove that I deserved to go and get into that program. And, yeah, a lot of the issue for me, Jared, was analysis paralysis, but it was also risk averse.
Hmm.
I'm very analytical. I'm very strategic, or I think I'm strategic, but I know I'm analytical.
Hmm.
And for me, a lot of that was what if I don't get in because I completely butcher this 60-second, video that I have to record, and I couldn't go back and record it. So, man, I spent a couple days just procrastinating, number one. But then number two, I'm like, I got to do it today. It was the weekend and we had plans later in the day, and then works, started the next day. And so I was like, all right. I sat down, I came up with everything I could on why I deserve to be in that program. And I had no idea what it was going to be, but something that hit me was, what's my biggest weakness? And I spent probably 30 minutes on what is my biggest weakness. Is it that I have analysis paralysis? No, that's a big weakness. Is it that I'm analytical? No, and that's not a weakness. It's the fact that I'm risk averse. I don't take chances. And you listen to podcasts, you talk to people. There's so many people out there that say, um, I did this and I made so many mistakes. And here I am, having done no deals, saying, what an idiot. Even I know that, right? I know you can't do that. But yet they have the deal and I don't, right? So at, for whatever reason, I just kind of honed in on that, Jared. And I was just like, my biggest weakness is the fact that I am extremely risk averse. And then because I'm risk averse, I'm not perfect by any means, but I'm not making these mistakes or these massive mistakes that I lose 5 grand, 10 grand. And so from that, I'm not able to learn.
Yeah.
And how can I hit, my dream, my goal of being financially free from the W-2, having time on my time, not working for someone else. And I knew being risk averse was just crippling me.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of, as funny as that sounds, as when I say that back, applying for grad school, which you don't need college, you don't need grad school to be a real estate investor, but that is what started that mindset for me. And then a year later, so my wife and I did this 75 hard. And one of that, for the listeners who may have not heard of that, you have to work out 2 times a day for 45 minutes. You have to drink a gallon of water. That was the hardest part for me. You have to read 10 pages and a few other things. But man, going back to what I said like 5, 10 minutes ago, Jared, I hated reading. I did not like it. There's 2 points in my life when I've really read. Well, 3. One was when I had to for school. Another one when I was deployed because we had so much free time. And then the last one is really, it's still continuing now. It's when we started 75 Hard. And my wife and I, we just came together. And even though we had totally different interests in books, we would talk about it and share stuff with each other. And I think that drew us closer together too, because we were both trying to improve ourselves. It wasn't me doing it, it wasn't her doing it. It was both of us doing it. And so that drew us together. But again, it's just this long evolution, these baby steps that are, incremental gains every single day.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, a lot to definitely unpack there. But yeah, thanks for walking us through that. And, I think just a couple of things to touch on is, when you're talking about your biggest weakness with that being risk adverse. And I think, this society teaches this in a way that, again, like you had mentioned, you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you put your money in a safe investment, right? And for those not on video, that's air quote, right? Yep. Stock market, mutual funds that we're taught. And then you work hard until, for 30, 40 plus years, and hopefully you have enough money to retire. And, when I asked Charlie about that, overcoming that middle class mindset, I mean, that's exactly it. That's what we're taught growing up. So, Charlie, you may be a little bit more risk adverse than others, but I mean, essentially, I think a lot of us are like that in one form or another, is because, I mean, I work hard for my money. I don't want to put it somewhere in an investment that where I'm going to lose it all, right?
Right.
Especially when start, you got your wife involved or say, a family, you got kids. I mean, you got to make sure you're making smart decisions so you're not risking your family, not being able to pay rent, right? God forbid
Yep.
if you lose that investment or, all your money there. So, I can definitely relate and understand that risk adverse and where that comes from. But on the other hand, like you said, you're limiting yourself to grow,
Yep.
because you're not, you know, taking the steps. Because I mean, I've I was like you too, just to highlight about the books. Before I was probably 25 years old, I probably read maybe 5 books, and most of those, I think 2 of them might have been Harry Potter. I did want to read those. Of course, it's the biggest book you could think of too, but I just for some reason I wanted to do that, and other ones were just all through school, right? All
Yeah.
books you had, Macbeth, and all those, right? And so, I was never a reader as well until started getting to this space and just, that personal growth there. Anyways, sidebar, but once I made that step, like, for me it was all right. I read that Rich Dad Poor Dad. I finally decided to, all right, hey, this is a route I want to pursue, right? I obviously, like you said, you're seeing a lot of people that have real estate assets, whether it's single family, multifamily, storage, mobile home, whatever that is, and they're doing well, and they're getting to a point, or they are at a point where they're work optional and have this time freedom, and that's what I craved. That I wanted to. I wanted to have that time freedom. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is just buying back my time, right? But once I got that first single family under my belt, once I got my foot across that threshold, because it's scary. I mean, there's no doubt
Hmm.
about it, right? It's scary. Once I did that, for one, there was a sigh of relief and a craving for more, right? Too.
Yeah.
So, so if you could, let's go ahead and jump into, what was your first real estate investment? Maybe just real quick highlight the details on that, and then we're gonna transition into how you got into the passive investing.
Yeah. Reading books and listening to podcasts and all that. Um, and now having my own podcast and talking to people, it seems like 95, this is a stat I'm totally making up, but it seems like 95% of real estate investors get into single family, right? It's the easiest to do and all that. So we had a couple single family rentals, you know, passive income, right? Wrong. I laughed because I thought it was pretty passive. We had property managers, and on 2 of them, it wasn't passive. I wasn't going up there much, but I was going up there sometimes, and I was talking to them a lot. And I was like, for the time I'm spending each month and the amount I'm making, which was like a couple $100, is it worth it? No, because there's not these big weekly, monthly checks coming in. And I'm spending time, and one wrong issue, right? It's going to wipe out the cash flow for at least a year. And that's not a major issue. That's just an issue.
Yeah.
Having to repaint is going to wipe out the cash flow for probably 8 months, repaint a few rooms. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, I'm looking for passive income. I'm looking for time freedom. And this single family doesn't really offer either one, quite frankly. Now, the upside to single family, when we sold, we made, nice chunk of change when we sold the properties,
Mm-hmm.
but during the hold time wasn't passive and really wasn't income either at that point.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing to highlight there is, single family can be a, like you said, I mean, again, we don't know the exact statistics here, but a lot of people get started off in single family.
Yep.
And a lot of people are really successful in single family too. I mean, you can make a lot of money. So we're not saying that, hey, don't go buy single family. But what Charlie's just saying is, and this was my experience too, is I thought it was going to be more passive than it was, even though I had a property manager and the cash flow. You get these big repairs that I mean, I had a $4,000 repair after two or 3 weeks of owning the property that wiped my cash flow out for 2 years, and the same with Charlie. And the thing about it is you factor these repairs into your underwriting. So they're called CapEx, right? And you factor vacancy and other expenses there. But, there's until you start, listening to podcasts, talking with other people, going to network events, you just don't know what other opportunities are out there.
Right.
And then I think this is a good transition. So you had the single family experience, and then, just another note, Charlie sold the house, made some money, right? So, but now you got exposure to the single family. And then what, Charlie? Walk us through your next steps there. Oh.
Yeah. So the first single family we owned was actually a home we lived in first, right? So I don't really consider that an investment because
Right.
we bought it to live in it and then we rented it out. So
Accidental landlord, right? Kind of deal.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was more on purpose because I wanted to be in real estate, but I think, and remember, Jared, I'm still very, very, very risk averse at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I never put a big chunk of change to buy an investment property yet because we put that money down to live in it. So really, I had heard about the syndication space, the multifamily syndication space years before. I was always kind of going back to it, but I'm like, well, single family just seems so much easier, right? Because it's smaller, so much less to manage and to deal with. But I knew some operators. He's my uncle. I've known him for almost 40 years now. But my uncle was doing the multifamily syndication space. I'd never heard about it from anyone else, though. This was probably 8 years ago now. Never heard anyone else doing it. Didn't know too much about it. I was like, it kind of makes sense, but not for passive investors, not for me, because I want to build a real estate empire. So I still probably I think it was 2020 or so, 2019, somewhere in there, where I said, screw this. I have to take action. I have to do something. So the most logical next step for me, again, baby steps, for me was I'm not buying an apartment complex. I'm passively investing with a team that has over $3 billion of assets. They've done it over 100 times. I think it was 150 times. I know their track record. I know the good and the ugly about it. So instead of me, still sitting on these sidelines after 5 years of me wanting to invest, I'm just going to put my money in with him. And I remember wiring the money thinking, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is so crazy. And about 3 days later, another email hit my inbox and I texted him. I said, wait, you have another deal? He's like, yeah, we put an offer on this deal and we didn't win it. But now the people that won it, they're backing out. So they want to go with our offer. So I kid you not, after not investing in for years, 6, 7, 8 years, I wired $50,000 over within 2 times within 3 days. That's how much I knew I needed to take action because I'm seeing everyone else. It's not FOMO. It's the fact that I'm going to miss out on a good retirement if I don't do something.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that was, again, going back, that mindset started changing. I'm risk averse. I'm not taking um, any action, let alone massive action. I said, screw it. I'm investing. And then 3 days later, I'm investing again. And my wife is like, what are you doing?
I
But
was just,
I knew
yeah,
this was what I want to do long term.
right.
And what was cool about that too, Jared, is, I mentioned their phenomenal track record. I also am able to learn from him in general, with this deal or without these deals. And so he's actually been a very big mentor to help with underwriting and networking, finding people. So had kind of the inside track there. But after I wired those two wires for those two deals, man, felt amazing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I totally relate to you, Charlie. I did the same thing. I mean, man, I probably invested in a handful of deals within a year and a half, right?
Yeah.
And and yeah, with and my wife, I remember, we're, sending $25,000 checks, $50,000 wires, right? And she's like, "What are we doing here? Do we even know?" Nobody, because you barely know about this getting into this space, and then of course we do our research, but they don't know much, and then so they're like, "What is this?" Again, going back to that mindset, it's just, hey, we're taught, put your money in the stock market, 401k, IRAs, things like that. And so let's just say it was definitely a conversation piece, Charlie, between me and my wife for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I'm with you, man. I started, and I honestly think it was like a healthy fear of, for me, like being in sales and commission based, right? Is I wanted to provide a backup plan and a retirement plan for my family.
Yeah.
And bottom line, and there's, of course, we know real estate, there's a lot of benefits. But it's really just a different bucket. So and Charlie and I aren't saying don't invest in the stock market, right? But I think it's super important to diversify and just have different buckets to put your money in and let it grow, right? And now I will say, and I'll go on record with this, I'm definitely more heavily into real estate just because I really believe in this asset, class. There's just so many benefits. Again, the tax to the growing your wealth to the compound to the brick and mortar. I mean, again, just love this space, but yeah, I mean, just diversifying. So. And I want to touch on too is, it's amazing how you can be so risk adverse and then wire over 100 grand within 3 days, right? Like you talk about the mindset.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And it's funny to hear you say it because I didn't look at it that way at the time. And now looking back, it's like, okay, so hold on, you're lying. You spent 7 years sitting on the sidelines and then within 3 days, two different deals.
Yeah.
And I think that was just, I knew what I was doing wasn't working. I knew working until I was 65, 75 years old, pinching pennies. Hopefully I could retire with a nice nest egg of, $1 million in my IRAs, which $1 million in 30, 40 years isn't going to be the same anywhere near
Right.
what it is, even in 10 years, right?
Mhm.
So I knew what I was doing wasn't going to work for me. I didn't like my job. I wanted that time freedom, and I knew real estate, makes 90, 95% of self-made millionaires. They make their money through real estate.
Right.
And why, I want to, there's a lot dumber people than me doing a lot better than me, right?
Mhm.
Because they take action. So when I had the opportunity, I said, yeah, I'm all in.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, and it just goes back to taking action, right? I mean,
Right.
again, once definitely educate yourself for sure, which, there's podcasts like Charlie and I have, there's a ton of books, ton of resources out there that you can use. I mean, ton of free content really, that, you could learn from. But the biggest thing is once you find something is just take that action. And I'm sure you'll have Charlie and I's experiences where you just want to do more. And
Absolutely.
the cool thing is you got that compounding effect. There's a huge benefit. I mean, you're not gonna double your money in, a year. Well, depending on what you do, but typically this is a long-term goal, but you got to think in the future, right? And I think it's super important. And I was just talking about this on a previous podcast where I was recording, and what are your goals? What are your investment goals? What's your why? It's very important to determine what that is, because this type of investing may not be for you, right? There's a lot of other streams. We were talking about this yesterday, Charlie, cash flow versus growth, right? So it's very important to determine what type of investor you are. What are your goals? What are you looking to achieve? And then yeah, again, real estate is a great way to create wealth and have a good retirement setup.
Yeah.
Oh,
And Jared, you
yeah.
you talked about the compound effect, and most people are visual learners, right? And I mentioned I'm analytical. I'm decent with spreadsheets. What I did about a year and a half ago was I said, okay, if I invested $50,000 one time, how much is that going to be when I retire? And I had about 35 years or so to retire. That was, I think it's $6.4 million if I just keep reinvesting, one time investment.
And that's in a
And
syndication, correct?
yep, and a
Okay.
syndication,
Yep.
100% passive.
Yep.
The only work I'm doing is vetting the operator and wiring my money, signing the paperwork,
Right.
once every few years, right? So five year goal to double money, keep reinvesting 35 years, 6.4 million, something like that.
Mm.
So I think that's powerful. When
Yeah.
I wrote that out, I was like, wow, I never saw this before,
Well, and just to add on to that, think about investing $50,000 per year,
Right.
right?
I'm not
Like,
that good at math, but that's a
no,
lot.
but I don't think you have to be to imagine the numbers that, right? And
Yeah.
so it's just, yeah, again, going, and thanks for highlighting that, Charlie, too, because that compounding effect, and I'm a visual learner myself, and I like putting examples to things too. And when you do that, that's what gets me excited about, about
Yeah.
passive investing. And again, it's the most passive that I found that you can be in real estate is you're letting somebody else do the work and they're giving you a return based on your investment.
Yeah. And
That's pretty remarkable.
that
Yeah.
doesn't include tax benefits. That does,
Right.
that's to me.
Yeah.
That's not the entire deal. That's to me.
Yeah.
Whereas if you invest in IRAs or 401ks, stock market does what, 7 to 10% a year. That's the stock market. That's before the fees.
Yeah.
But when you talk to real estate investors, that's after the fees.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, because I mean, if you got a broker, or, you're working with one of these bigger firms, they're definitely getting their commissions and fees off of these
Multiple
investments
times.
for sure,
Yep.
multiple times. So yeah, don't look at just your return. Look at your bottom line. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something Jim Pfeiffer actually talks about that with left field investors is look at that bottom line number. Can be very eye opening for sure, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about, because I know you did that passive investment. You did those two, and then I know you moved it more into the active space. So I real quick just want to touch on, I believe you leveraged some HELOCs, which is a home equity line of credit, right, to build some of your portfolio. So if you could walk us through building your portfolio, and then now how you help educate others as well about this space.
Going back to the analytical piece, I I'm trying to sum it up. Essentially, I saw a video. I didn't know it at the time. It's called Velocity Banking. It's how you can, again, me being risk averse and middle class mindset, how we could pay off our home in 7 years. And as I was going through the numbers, I of course built a calculator. That's what I do. And I realized we can pay off our home in 7 years and invest at the same time. And so we had, without running through, give a high level of the numbers. I think we had about 100,000 in equity in the home. Took out a HELOC, put some money down on the house on our primary mortgage on the balance, refinanced the HELOC, and we used the rest to invest in real estate. And some people say, "Oh, that's really risky." I have so many rebuttals for that. We had about 150K or so in IRAs, 401Ks. I had a great job, uh, phenomenal job. Actually, we had some rental properties. So, like, plan D would be, oh, we're screwed, right? That's if there's a massive recession, if I lost my job and the home values plummeted, because we had equity in some of the other homes as well. So we liked it so much, on a rental property, we took out a HELOC and also invested with that. And then the way what velocity banking says or is about is all of your, instead of having a savings account, all of your money just goes to pay down the HELOC as quick as possible, so you can repeat that process. So essentially what we did is we leveraged a line of credit. We started paying down our mortgage, started investing with it, and all of the income from everything, from the jobs, from rental properties, all that went to pay down the HELOC. And so we had more credit on the HELOC, and so we got into some more deals that way.
Nice. And it baffles me too, because being so risk adverse, right? To again, doing two deals in a matter of 3 days, and then now leveraging your HELOC, right, on the primary into, which it just shows you the power of leveraging, right? As long as you're being smart, and again, I mean, you want to mitigate your risk as much as possible. Nothing's recession proof. Right. Nothing's going to be risk proof. I mean, the bottom line is with investing, the worst case scenario is you could lose all your money, or and in this case, your HELOC, right, you can lose your primary residence. But right, you said you're super analytical. You put it on a spreadsheet. And one thing I found when I'm doing underwriting is if the numbers work, the numbers work. Right. You do your stress test, right? You things, you plan for the market not going the way it's supposed to. I mean, we just saw that with this interest rate hike. I mean, you want to definitely plan on this stuff. But again, if the numbers work, the numbers work. So yeah, thanks for highlighting that, Charlie. And I think it's super important to just for listeners that you don't have to have $100,000 sitting in the bank. There's other ways to leverage some of the equity in your home. Again, I just want to clarify, being smart about it, right? You definitely want to, if you're not sure what you're doing, have somebody that's done it before or knows real estate, take a look at your numbers. But it's a great way to get involved in some of these deals, or leveraging your self-directed IRA accounts, right? You can invest in these and sell 401ks, and other things like that as well. So yeah, there's to sum it up, a lot of opportunities too to get involved. So you leverage your HELOC, you end up building your portfolio there. So let's talk about what you're doing now. Let's talk about H&K Investment Group, and then how you're helping getting the word out and educate others about this space.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like the syndication space, it is a small community. If you're brand new if you came upon this podcast or came across me or you, Jared, and you're like, what's this about? You've probably never heard of this. You probably don't know anyone doing it. Yeah. But being in this space, Jared and I could probably say 10 names and we know 7 of them, right? Yeah. It's a very small space. And so at H&K, what we're trying to do is just educate. through the podcast, through your podcast, going on podcasts like yours, Jared, and just sharing our story, having you share your story with my audience. It just, the more people hear it, the more it starts clicking, the more it starts to make sense. We don't do too many podcasts, but I like to post about, or not podcasts, webinars, excuse me. I like to post about it on social media. Um, we're starting a community for real estate investors just to learn and network. Man, there's been a lot of stuff that we've done as far as what we're going to do in the next 12 months. Start a meetup for, and I know you're from Fayetteville, North Carolina. I was in the Army there, which is funny because we didn't talk about that yesterday, but we're actually going to start a meetup for military members, both active and retired or veterans, because again, a lot of people don't know about the syndication space. If you're in the military, you're taught TSP. If you're out of the military or government, then it's 401k and IRA. So we just want to educate people. Hey, there's other options out there that you've never heard about before. Right. And it's not a Ponzi scheme. It's not a scam. It's literally how the wealthy have been investing for a long time. Yeah. And now normal, common people like me and you, us peasants, now we can invest in these massive millions of dollars of assets. We can do it, just normal people like us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, not a lot of people know about this space. Like you were talking about, once you get involved in the space and you start getting to know one another and know the big names and stuff. But, I think that's part of our responsibility, Charlie, of doing what we're doing is just helping educate others. Again, just putting your portfolio, right, investing in just a different bucket. This is, again, just another resource, another tool to help get you to your goals, right? And I just, Charlie, I was telling you yesterday, thank God we have these podcasts because my wife, I could just talk for hours about this stuff, and my wife is just like, just go somewhere, right? Yeah. She can hear a little bit of it, but at a certain point, she's like, all right, go in your office and do one of those calls or something, right? Yeah. But I have such a passion for it, as I can tell you do as well. I mean, because this is life changing. Right. Life changing. And I mean, if you can take 15 years off your work life, or be work optional, even if you love what you do, just have the option, to have more freedom and, have a choice, right? And retire at 50 instead of 65. I mean, that's huge. I mean, Charlie and I know people that retired in 3 to 5 years just based on doing this. Now, granted, I will say they play more of an active role, but it's possible, right? And going back to that mindset it just depends. All right, you get a goal, well, first establish your goals and then, get an action plan together and just, have that change in mindset or that mindset shift to, all right, here's what I'm going to do to achieve it. And I'll tell you, Charlie, I think one thing too, talking about this mindset is I steadily educate, and listen to books when I'm at the gym, things like that, because it's easy when things get a little tough or life gets really busy. It's easy just to want to stop doing what you're doing or quit or not doing this or not taking this step or this, right? And, man, I've quit a lot of things in my head, but thank God I got the mindset stuff I listen to and the resources and people like you, Charlie, that I can talk to and, just kind of help get me over those bumps in the road. Right.
Yep.
So,
community is a huge thing. And I think with social media, we're all kind of, it's not really social,
Yeah.
And then I think COVID kind of put a damper on communities and people getting out. And so communities, I think a huge piece of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, I love what you're doing, in Nashville, or you're Nashville, right?
Yeah.
Tennessee. Yeah. Yeah, I love what you're doing there with the veterans and the active military there. So well, kind of a segue here. We're going to go into our fire round. What I'm going to do, Charlie, is I'm going to ask you four questions. And one is if you could recommend a real estate book and that would help investors for just starting out, and then a mindset book that is, help that, well, a book about mindset that has helped you along the way.
So I'm going to go, maybe most of your guests have said this, but if you have not read Rich Dad Poor Dad, pause this, wherever you're listening, pause it, get it on Audible, go to Barnes and Noble. Hopefully you get sponsored by Barnes and Noble with that. But man, Rich Dad Poor Dad really was so eye-opening for me. And it doesn't necessarily talk about how you can get into syndications, right?
Yeah.
But it is just why it's how the wealthy minds work, where you and I weren't born that way. Most people aren't born that way, but Rich Dad Poor Dad, 100%.
Yeah, totally agree.
For the mindset, there's so many. I think one, and I Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Absolutely unbelievable story. Went from obese to now one of the best athletes in the world.
Mhm.
And he did it because of his mindset. Not because he wanted to get in good shape. I mean, that book is amazing.
Yeah. No, it's funny as our last guest too, just they referenced that David Goggins book as well.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yep.
And I
Um,
would recommend the Audible version if you like Audible, because it's also kind of like a podcast in the middle. They read the chapter and then they spend like 10 to 20 minutes just talking about the chapter. And David Goggins goes into a little more detail. So if you like Audibles, then I'd get that one.
yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. I'm adding that to my list for sure. So thanks for sharing that. All right. Next question here. What is a practical first steps the audience can take to explore the space of passive investing?
So you're already listening to podcast. So I'm not going to mention that because I think that's a great way to learn more. When you find a podcast, go back and listen to others. One thing that you could do is reach out to the people on the podcast. Um, Almost everyone that I've interviewed, I'm sure almost everyone that you've interviewed, Jared, would talk to you if you're new or newer to investing. And I'm going somewhere with this, but one of the things that I did when I first started learning about syndication was I attended so many webinars. I knew I didn't have the capital to invest in all these deals, but I went to probably a couple dozen webinars, learned why they liked that property, what about the property made sense, what was their business plan, learned about teams, people, things like that, where they're and on social media, you may hear, oh, we just closed on a deal, but they may not talk about that with you, right? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But on webinars, they do deep dives. And so you're able to ask questions and learn so much about how they operate, what they look for, and what they're planning on doing with the property. So after you talk to enough or hear enough webinars and talk to enough people, now you're going from, okay, I understand what they're doing, instead of being like all that's foreign to me. You understand what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Love that. Next question here. What is a daily habit you practice keeping you on track towards your goals?
Great question. This is a habit I had for years. I got away from it for about 5 years, and about 6 weeks ago, I sat down and I'm like, okay, what are my goals for 2024? And instead of, okay, here's my goals. Okay, I'm going to go watch TV now. It was, okay, here's my goals. And then I broke them down into what I want to do each quarter,
Mm.
uh, each month, week, and day. And so I have SMART goals. And SMART goals are very motivating for me because it breaks it down. I'm sure most people have heard of SMART goals, but
Mm.
it's a specific goal. It's something that you can measure, you can attain it, and it's realistic, and there's a time frame on it. So, for example, I want to get into one deal this year or one multifamily deal this year. I want to go to 5 webinars this quarter. Whatever it is, you can come up with SMART goals, and that will keep you on track.
Yeah. No, I love that. And Brandon Turner, I was actually on one of his goal setting webinars, speaking of that he did at the beginning of the year. And yeah, and it's, SMART goals are, and just like, so once you determine your goals for the year, right, is to break that down, like Charlie said, into those quarters. And then one thing he talks about, and Charlie, you talked about this as well, is just that habit tracker, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's super important. It's like, okay, hey, I wanna work out, um, X number of days, right? So instead of saying, hey, I want to work out every day or do something active every day, it's like, no, just do something active for 300 days, right? And then break that down to weekly and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to work out 4 to 5 times, or maybe just 4 times a week, right? And if you miss a day, it's okay. You got 2 more or 3 more to make up,
Yep.
and so it's just, again, going back to mindset, right? If you can break that down into small little chunks. I have a good friend of mine. It's like, how do you eat an elephant?
One
One
bite
bite
at
at
a
a
time.
time,
Yep.
right? So, yeah, no, I love that, Charlie. And thanks for breaking that down too. I think that's super important to achieving, because sometimes you set these goals that can be overwhelming, right? I mean, it can, be, yeah. So, all right. Well, let's go into the last and final question here. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would that be?
Great question. I want to help veterans with PTSD. I have PTSD myself, and we lose a lot. I've probably lost 9 to 10 people I served with through suicide,
Hmm.
and I don't know how to help them yet, but I want to have some type of organization or partner with an organization that I can get behind to build. We talked about community, but I'm going to bring that back and have that community, that brotherhood and sisterhood, and just to help veterans.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love that, man. And again, community is so important. And want to tell you again, thank you for your service and all that you've done too. And um, yeah, just the friends you lose and stuff. I don't have that experience being in the service, but definitely have lost some close friends of mine, and it's tough. And if there's
Mhm.
something we can do, do something. Um, yeah, man, I totally support you that, and great answer. It speaks a lot about your character, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is, just that giving back mentality, right? Because our some of our toughest times can be our most influential experiences to others,
Yeah.
right? Well, Charlie, great podcast today. I really enjoyed just diving in deep to the world of real estate, community, mindset. I mean, there was so many things we touched on here. And if you could, before I let you go, man, tell listeners how they can connect with you and, yeah, learn more about you.
The best way to reach out to me would be on LinkedIn, Charlie Hardage, Hardage. We have a website, have a podcast, but HKIGLLC.com is the website. Um, LinkedIn is would be the best way.
Awesome. Well, Charlie, thanks again for joining us on the show, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. Nice talking to you again.
All right. Yep. Thank you for listening to the Optimal Wealth Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, be sure to optimize your results and take massive action on what you have learned here today. For more, visit optimalequitygroup.com.